Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the regular November 23rd, 2015 meeting of the San Francisco Ethics Commission. I will first take roll, and I will say that Ms. Hayen, unfortunately, was not going to be able to attend due to illness, and she's been excused. Commissioner Andrews? Here. Commissioner Herr? Here. Commissioner Keene? Here. All right, all commissioners are present and accounted for. I will ask for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Do I have anyone who wishes to make public comment at that time, this time?
Oh, I'm sorry. Ladies first. That's not nice, Charlie. Larry Bush on behalf of Friends of Ethics. We had a discussion this weekend about the fact that the Commission's budget will be due in February, as I recall, which means that essentially in your January meeting, which is the next one you have, is the first chance you have to take a look at what's been produced. And I wanted to recommend, and we wanted to recommend, that the Commission name 2 members of the Commission to serve as a committee in the interim, in particular to take a look at a budget that would include a Commission secretary position, and secondly, to create a relationship with the Controller's Office to see if, in fact, what they might be able to do in making assets from their office available, and whether they might be able to, on their own, create the internet capability that would benefit ethics as well as the Controller's Office. So I suggest that that be something that you all think about doing.
Let me ask you if you still see a need for a 2-person committee. We are going to meet on January 5th.
Oh, you are?
That's going to replace our normal December meeting. We're going to meet at 9 in room 416 from 9 to 11:30. The primary subject of that meeting will be a submission from the staff of a proposed budget, and we will then have the month of January to massage it and get public comment, probably have some kind of a interested persons meeting in between to allow comments to come in before we finalize it at our meeting in the regular meeting in January.
I think that sounds pretty complete. One point that I've had discussed with the controller is that when a department head changes, there is often a brief audit that looks at what's happened with the budget and what's happening with the department. And it hasn't happened, we haven't had a change here for 10 years, but prior to that there was not a review of the budget here, I think since 1995. So if you ask them at this point, you could do that without waiting for your January meeting, to initiate at least a review. I mean, they're not going to have time for a full audit of some of the duties that have fallen to the Commission and what it would take to staff that. It will help you then as you have the discussions amongst yourselves, and then if you go to Harvey Rose and talk to Harvey Rose about why you would need more money. And I'll use this one example. Because of budget considerations, the prior executive director decided to hold off on any audits and reviews of major donors. And major donors are people who make $10,000 or more in contributions. And those are pretty much the heavy hitters, and yet they were just sort of swept to the side in terms of reviewing stuff. That would be an example of what you might ask the controller to take a look at in terms of performance needs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Charlie Marsteller, for the record. Given all that you've been through these last several years, particularly Commissioner Herr, the budget will be a piece of cake in relative terms. I did want to say that if you want to discuss this matter further about the missing public funds from the campaign finance public financing account that dates back to 2010, I'm willing to discuss that, but I didn't see it on today's agenda. I hope you've received some kind of a briefer memo on that subject, because it's something that I think you definitely need to give some attention to. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name's Kevin Bogus. I'm the Director of Policy at Coleman Advocates for Children and Youth here in San Francisco. We've been around for about 40 years serving children and their families around issues. I just wanted to comment around the implementation of Prop C that you're going to be discussing later in the meeting, and just really ask that you consider nonprofits such as ours when you think about how to implement it, to make sure that the low-income student and parent members that work in our organization don't lose their ability to speak to their representatives and have their voice heard. A lot of the work that we do falls into some of the categories put forth in the ballot measure that was approved, but I don't necessarily feel like the type of work that we do is the type of work that you are trying to stamp out and to monitor more and assign more financial fees and obligations, which we're concerned could prevent our membership from being able to engage with their representatives and really have their voices heard. So we just ask that you really consider us and reach out to different community groups and see how we can make sure that we are monitoring lobbyists, but we aren't minimizing the voices of low-income families and young people in San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? All right, turning to item number 2 and item number 3, discussion and public action regarding possible action regarding the Commission's appointment of a new executive director and possible closed session. I would say we are not going to have a closed session. I am prepared to announce that the Ethics Commission has selected Ms. Leanne Pelham to serve as a new executive director. She will assume her duties on January 4th. Just to give you some background information, Ms. Pelham served from 2001 to 2011 as the executive director of the Los Angeles Ethics Commission, where she had been employed for the 9 years prior to assuming her duties as the executive director as a staff member of the Ethics Commission. So she had a total of 19 years with the Los Angeles Ethics Commission, the last 10 of which she was the executive director. She was forced out because Los Angeles had a 10-year term limit, and so after leaving the Los Angeles Ethics Commission, she moved back to the Bay Area from where she originally grew up, and has most recently, from 2013 to July of 2015, served as the Santa Clara Valley Water District Director of Ethics and Corporate Governance, from which she resigned as July of 2015. As most of you know, the Commission recruiting agency delivered to us 32 potential applicants, and Commissioner Andrews and I went through those 32 and selected 5 that we felt met the criteria of what we needed as a new executive director, and interviewed the 5 via Skype, and then recommended to the full commission 3 of the applicants, all of whom were exceedingly well qualified, any one of whom certainly met what we were looking for. However, I think that the commission and their hearing and made the decision to select Ms. Pelham because of her proven track record as an effective, independent, nonpartisan leader and manager of the LA Ethics Commission, and her obvious energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the work of assuring good governance. We believe that makes her the right choice for this commission at this time. We look forward to working with her in the coming years, and we're confident the staff, the regulated community, and all other stakeholders and the community at large will find that we have chosen well. As I said, she will assume her duties on January 4th, and until that date, Acting Executive Director Jesse Minardi will continue in that role, and we want to thank him on behalf of the full, I want to thank him on behalf of the full commission for having performed his duties as the acting executive director in a highly professional and competent manner. I will now entertain a motion for the commission to formally appoint Ms. Pelham as our new executive director.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any comments from the public? All right. Hearing no comments from the public, I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimously accepted. And welcome, Ms. Pelham, and I'm going to ask you if you would step to the podium and maybe give us a few words of your vision for the future.
Good evening, Chair Rennie and Commissioners. It's really an honor to be here. This is a very kind and welcoming place to be, and I know there's a lot of work ahead.
You might change your mind next year.
We're going to go with that for now. I very much appreciate the effort that it takes for a commission to select a new executive director, and appreciate fully that a time like this, there's great transition for an organization. As I look forward to stepping in this role, I'm very aware that this body and San Francisco voters have continued to express a very strong interest in the goals that the Ethics Commission was established by voters here in the city and county to pursue. And I'm really looking forward to the challenges that we have ahead working together to achieve those ends as the Commission begins its next chapter as an organization. I think, as I'm sure you also appreciate, for an organization that's in transition, there are opportunities. So, of course, there's an opportunity to build on past successes and also to really look to how we can strengthen our organization going forward. Toward that end, I think there are three areas that you've expressed and that we've talked about that I think will be sort of primary for us. First, supporting what we do well organizationally and continuing to support that. Also, looking to align resources where it might be necessary to improve areas where we can better deliver on the voters' mandate for the Commission. Secondly, strengthening our ability as an agency and our capacity as an agency to be a trusted and effective enforcer of the laws within the jurisdiction of the Commission. That would come from ensuring policies and procedures maximize fairness and objectivity in the process, that the rules are applied consistently and, of course, with appropriate transparency. So these are challenges for any organization, I appreciate, but I think working creatively and energetically with you, with the staff, and others who care deeply about the work of this Commission, there is a success ahead for the work of the Ethics Commission here in San Francisco. And finally, to both initiate and shape public policy, really looking comprehensively at the laws under the jurisdiction here that you've invested with by the voters, and working to see how we can really strengthen the rules that we all want to live by here in the city going forward. So working to take a comprehensive review of that and to make some recommendations for how we can enhance that, and to really work in partnership with the voters to continue to provide an opportunity for them to directly speak, to make sure that the rules continue to stay workable and that they're strong in practice. I am very privileged and honored to be here. I know this is hard work, but I'm very excited about the possibility of working with you all. I appreciate your optimism and your confidence in me, and I very much look forward to working with you and the staff and others here in the city, as I said, who care so deeply about this work in January. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I also realize you have a very busy agenda tonight, and I look forward to that work starting with you in January.
Thank you very much, and we are all looking forward to January.
As I am. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Turning to item number 4, discussion and possible action regarding the Commission's implementation of the provisions of Proposition C. We have, for the record, we have received a communication from the San Francisco Human Services Network concerning Proposition C and its implementation, as well as the public comment that was made previously. I'd ask Mr. Minardi, do you want to bring us up to date on where we are on that?
Well, as the Commission and the public knows, Proposition C was approved by the voters in November 3rd, 2015 election. And so what staff has done is tried to identify the issues that need to be addressed by both staff and the Commission in the interim between now and the effective date of February 1st, 2016. And so we just have a brief memo setting forth what are the sort of immediately apparent issues. I'm sure more will pop up, but most of those are things like drafting the necessary forms, dealing with questions and preliminary guidance pending the Commission's adoption of more extensive regulations, conducting outreach and education to the community about the new requirements. And then ultimately, because this ballot measure did provide for funding for an electronic filing system, we will have to execute or amend a vendor contract. Currently, our contract is with NetFile, and they have given us, based on past experience, it usually takes up to a year just to sort of execute the contract or the amendment, and then it may take anywhere from 6 to 9 months for them to actually sort of build the system. So in the meantime, there will be there will be filing via paper forms, which is what we have to get out by the February 1st timeline. So those are sort of the general overview of the immediate issues. Some are raised in the email that was received today, but my understanding is certainly the point of this hearing is to further solicit comment from the public regarding implementation issues that they may see.
Mr. Minardi, what regarding the nonprofit issue, have you talked to members of the public, and do you have any thoughts or recommendations on increasing the limit for nonprofits before which they would have to register?
The threshold?
Yes.
So I think that, one of the main issues raised by the community has been that nonprofits that already have a number of sort of compliance obligations that might be generally low staffed have to, for spending relatively limited amount of funds, will then incur this reporting obligation. I do think that, one way it would require, obviously, an amendment of the ordinance. But one way to balance both that concern as well as the concern that nonprofits can be used effectively for sort of this type of lobbying is to, as Commissioner Hirsch said, is to raise the threshold, the reporting threshold, so that, or the registration trigger, so that folks really doing basic grassroots stuff would not have to register. So that would require another trip to the board. Basically, at this point, the commission would have to approve it by 4 votes, and then the board would have to do it by 2/3 vote. But I think that, in my mind, is one effective way of doing this in striking that balance between true grassroots and nonprofits that might be established by, let's say, other entities for this type of lobbying.
Because we will lose you at the end of the year, do you have any thoughts on what that number should be?
I don't have a specific number offhand, but I'm certainly willing to give that to folks and think about it in more detail. Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope your conclusion is not you're assuming facts, not evidence.
Well. You mean about Mr. Minardi?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Go ahead.
Maybe
Mr.
I'm being
Keene.
pessimistic.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Chair. I think what we might do is just take a moment, since we've actually, since the election, the commission itself has not publicized at all the fact that we put a proposition on the ballot, Proposition C, by unanimous vote of all of the commissioners, that 75% of the voters of San Francisco voted for the ballot, for that. 75%, the people of San Francisco approved that. The voters liked what we did. It was the first time in over more than a dozen years that this commission exercised its power and authority and mandate under the charter to put things on the ballot. And I think the voters approving it and the fact that it was backed by all of the major entities in the city, the Chronicle, the Examiner, several former mayors, members of the Board of Supervisors, other types of good governmental organizations, indicates that we did a pretty good thing, and I think we ought to blow our own horn for it. This is the first that I would have liked to have seen something that had gone out in regard to our general materials that go out on a regular basis, at least acknowledging that we had put C on the ballot and that it had won. This is the first opportunity to do it, and I think I'm taking a little time to crow about it because I think we should, on behalf of all of us and the people of San Francisco, are well served by it. We'll talk later on about some of the things relating to the issues. I would just like to say to the gentleman from Coleman, an organization that I've known for a long period of time and worked with over many years, particularly when I was in the San Francisco Public Defender's Office, and respect very much, you don't have a thing to worry about. You've got absolutely nothing to worry about in regard to this. It affecting nonprofits like yours from doing the kinds of civic involvement that you've been doing over the course of the last 40 years or so and will continue to do. I think much of the Examiner and the Chronicle and the other entities that looked at it and looked at the whole issue of nonprofits as some sort of Chicken Little type thing, that the sky was going to fall for nonprofits, is simply not true. And there's nothing to worry about in regard to it. The little things that we may have to tinker with, having to do with exemptions, other types of things, we can do quite easily through regulations, and we will. So I just wanted to take that few moments for us to just sort of sit back and bask in the glory of the fact that we had on the ballot in November in the election a measure that won by more than any other measure on the ballot. I think we did some pretty good work.
Can we go
colleagues.
Home now?
Congratulations.
Exactly.
I would echo Commissioner Keene's comments, and particularly it seems to me that in drafting regulations, rather than going the route which would require us to get 4 out of 5 commissioners agreement and the Board of Supervisors supermajority agreement, that we think in terms of how we define members so that we can understand, so that the nonprofits, the small ones like the Coleman that they mentioned, that their members communicating are not expenditure lobbyists. That is not what the ordinance was aimed at. But it is by some regulation definition, maybe we can circumscribe and deal with their problems. And it's a matter of the staff coming up with a set of regulations, trying to deal with the concerns that these small nonprofits may have, but yet stay within the spirit of the ordinance, so that we don't have to start watering it down. But that's where I view that we can use regulations as a way to protect against an adverse impact on low-income organizations that are doing good work.
Chair Rennie. So I'm in agreement with Chair Rennie. When we had this fuller discussion a few months back, and I ultimately did vote for Prop C because I frankly believe generally that it is a good ordinance. I did raise my concern around nonprofits. I think what remains out here in the community is how well we did at reaching out for community input. I think if there is an opportunity to do that, I think we probably should seek to get a little more input as we look at possibly amending to address some of these concerns that we have for nonprofits. And again, I am fully in support of the spirit of it, but at the same time, I think back then I said I just want to make sure that we just don't do scorched earth and not pay attention to some of these smaller nonprofits and end up taking out some of the smaller nonprofits and never actually getting to the larger nonprofits because they found a new and interesting and innovative way of circumventing even Prop C. And I'm sure they're out there working on it right now for those who are probably seeking to, whether they know they're going to violate it or not. So whether that is a fuller discussion that we're going to have at this meeting or whether we're able to put something on the agenda at an upcoming meeting, possibly in January, one of the two meetings, I think we should at least widen the doorway for community conversation and input as we seek to make these. Whether we did a good job of it or not in the first go-round, we certainly have an opportunity to do it now. So that is my recommendation to the Commission.
I agree with Commissioner Andrews that we ought to hear what the public has to say, kind of get a lot of input, and then evaluate the best way to address any concerns, whether that be by amendment or by regulations.
Right. I will take any public comment.
Hi, Larry Bush from Friends of Ethics. Just a few points. The memo on implementation suggests one way of looking at what's defined as a member using a state code. But if you go back in time to what the Commission did 10 years ago or so, Anita Mayo will know better than I, when they were looking at the Committee on Jobs, they came up with a definition that the Commission accepted, that it would include all of the companies who were members of the Committee on Jobs, as well as all their employees when they were doing member communications. That's a very broad definition of a member. Secondly, this same issue came up with the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party was sending mailers to registered Democrats in Los Angeles from the state party, but not to the rest of the state. And so the question came up is, can you cherry pick which part of your membership you want to reach, or do you have to reach all the members if you're doing a member communication? And the result was that they said you can go ahead and cherry pick. What I'm suggesting is that in looking at this issue, obviously it's critical that you listen to people who are affected by this and who are members of the potential regulated community. But give them some other options that show another way, as Chair Rennie says, through regulations of defining what is a member. That's one issue. A second issue is, what is a work product that's designed for lobbying? Is it a work product that is normally done, like, for example, what Choo Choo does on a housing balance study, and that's a routine thing that they regularly do? Or is it a product that was created specifically to lobby the board and the public, like Airbnb's study about how much taxes they were paying as a result? There's a difference between those two things, and you can pretty well show what they are. And then the third thing is there was another approach to this in Los Angeles, which is that they have an exemption for nonprofits that receive public funding from state, federal, or local governments and who serve indigent persons who then do not receive, who do not make any payment for those services. And they are exempt under LA's expenditure lobbyings. So there are a number of options that you can look at. I'm just suggesting that when you have this discussion with the nonprofits, know that your research will tell them options that they might not have thought of and might help you move forward.
Thank you.
Good evening, Eileen Hansen, former commissioner. I do think it's important to appreciate, and I do appreciate that the commission took this on and for the first time in many years put something on the ballot, was proactive. The core of this is critically important. Unfortunately, I have great concerns about the implementation for nonprofits, and I appreciate that Commissioner Andrews and Commissioner Hayon at the time expressed their concerns, but I was troubled that then it was a vote that was unanimous. I asked if we could stop the train, if we could tinker with it before it went on the ballot, or pull it until we address this issue. And unfortunately, I was a lone voice in the wilderness. It didn't happen. Here we are. I wish I could have saved the commission from dealing with this challenge, because as we saw in the election, there were many, many organizations, and I don't think it's fair to kind of blow it off as this Prop C got the majority of support. It got much support from big names. It got much support from the public. It did not get a lot of support from nonprofits. And in fact, there's an assumption that we did a good deal of outreach to nonprofits, to unions, to the public before this went on the ballot. That's not true. This rolled very fast. In 2 months from suggesting it, it was ready to go on the ballot. There had been no targeted outreach to nonprofits or unions. There was no effort to include those groups in the interested person meeting. The list that goes out to invite people to our regular meetings or to interested persons is woefully short, or at least it was. I think we've done some work since to increase the number of nonprofits and unions on that list, but at the time, there were very few, I'm not sure if there were any, unions and nonprofits, so they did not know about it. I, unfortunately, was ill, not able to participate. By the time I heard about this, it was almost too late. I immediately notified nonprofits. They were immediately concerned. We could have dealt with it at the time. Now that it's passed, it's water under the bridge, but what I would ask is it needs to be implemented in February. I understand there's not a commission meeting in December. I don't know if you're willing to have interested persons meetings in December, but if not, I would ask that we have at least 2 interested persons meetings in January, specifically targeted to nonprofits and unions to talk about this issue, one during the day and one during the evening, so people could come at one of those times, and that we do a very yeoman's job of getting people to that meeting and having the discussion about what to do. Nonprofits are exempt from being contact lobbyists. Why are they not exempt from being expenditure lobbyists? I think there are some reasons, but we've never had that discussion. We've never, I mean, tonight was kind of the fullest discussion about nonprofits so far, so let's have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Debbie Lerman. I'm with the San Francisco Human Services Network. First of all, I would like to congratulate you for the passage of Prop C, and we applaud putting good government measures on the ballot. And 75% is exciting, but frankly, I think a good government measure in San Francisco should have received 97% of the vote. Why didn't it? Nonprofits. I think you probably all heard the Human Services Network and the Council of Community Housing Organizations. We were out there very visibly once we found out about the measure, which wasn't until sometime in the middle of August, by which point there was already a long list of policymakers and political clubs that had endorsed the measure. When we found out about it, we went through our endorsement process, which takes a couple weeks, and then we hit the bricks and started going out to clubs and talking to people, and support started to drop. And we actually have quite a long list of nonprofit organizations that did oppose Prop C in the end, but we were already way behind the curve before we even heard about it. I have submitted to you a memo, and I thank you for considering it. It lays out why we think that Prop C will harm the ability of nonprofit organizations to advocate in San Francisco, and particularly those who represent the most vulnerable voices in our city. And it also lays out several other concerns about how Prop C does harm nonprofits. We wish we had been part of this conversation from the beginning. We are small. I'm the only staff at HSN. Choo Choo has 2 staff. We're tiny. and we try to keep track of what's going on at City Hall, and now I'm on your email list, but there are about 128 bodies that meet regularly in San Francisco, and we can't keep our eye on all of them. So we do look forward to participating in the process as time goes on, and we are very thankful that you will hear now our concerns. But we are making a specific request that you schedule a hearing and specifically consider and hear from members of the nonprofit community at that hearing, and do that before the implementation rules are out, and that you make an effort to outreach to our sector and bring us into this process. And we do also ask that you consider using the amendment process as it is laid out in the measure, and hold a vote on whether to bring forward a proposed amendment to the Board of Supervisors to exempt nonprofits from Prop C, just as they are exempted from the contact lobbyist legislation that was approved by the Board of Supervisors last year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Rennie and Commissioners, and congratulations on a job well done, Prop C. I have more of a question than a comment. Relative to reporting and disclosure laws, I noticed under performance measures in the Ethics Commission summary and report, you mention or report that there were 17 campaign committees that were audited, but in the report, the annual report under audit program, it mentions, or it says here, finally, with the help from the Controller's Office, the Commission auditors reduced its audit backlog by completing 31 audits during the fiscal year. Could you please explain the discrepancy? Because in the under performance measures it says 17, where in the annual report it says 31.
Minardi, do you have a response for her?
I don't have it immediately in front of me, but the distinction is likely between what was performed by the Ethics Commission itself, the staff itself, and what was performed by the Controller's Office, because the Controller's Office did I think about exactly 14 of those. So the distinction is between what our office did and then what was basically farmed out to the Controller's Office.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I don't think this item called for any specific action, but I guess I have two questions. One is, do you think that it would be beneficial before you start drafting regulations to have the public interested persons meeting, or draft a set of proposed regulations dealing with what you understand to be the concerns of the nonprofits, and then set meetings?
Usually it's, which I would think would be the preferable route, you would do an IP meeting first, and you would solicit comment, and then to the extent you get comment, then you draft the regs, and then you send them out and let people comment on them as well, either at the meeting or preferably at a second IP meeting. I think the challenge is going to be that I don't think we're going to have regs in place by February 1st. So there's going to be, this is what happened with the permit consulting and the major developer reporting that went into effect last year, is that there's going to be a little bit of a lag time for, say, a month or two, where we're going to have to issue some preliminary guidance that's not a regulation, but it's just sort of our best guess as to where we're going. And the Commission's sort of question is, do they want to be a little more loose on it, or do they want to be a little more sort of strict on it, I guess, is this in terms of what staff does. Because it's drafting the regulations is kind of it doesn't take exceedingly long, but it is a little bit of a process.
Well, suppose you were to schedule an interested persons meeting for some time in December, recognizing we're going to be running into the Christmas holidays, so it'd have to be somewhere done by the middle, I would think, of December, with the idea that in addition to the budget, you might report on what's been said and what you may propose to do, and then set another interested persons meeting between the January 5th meeting and our regular meeting at the end of January.
Sure. We can
Does that seem doable?
Sure.
Any discussions or comments the commissioners have? Well, let's try and go that route. And I think you have expanded the interested persons list so that it hopefully covers those nonprofits that are concerned, and we've heard from two tonight that certainly should be given notice of when we're going to have it.
Sure.
Right.
Would the idea be then, Chair Rennie, that we would consider implementing regulations in January?
If the staff can come up with some proposed regulations that deal with that issue that don't require amending but are simply implementation regulations, I would think yes, by the end of January, so that there are at least some guidance because we have an election coming up again next year.
Right. And so are you contemplating comprehensive regulations for implementation, or just relating to this issue?
I would just say that I think we can, certainly by the 5th, get a rundown of what happened at the interested persons meeting, and then we can sort of go from there, because there probably will be issues that are identified as well that aren't identified right here at this time. But I think we have a good idea of what the general sort of universe of issues is, and we can get feedback on that.
All right. And I guess I would say to those of you who are here from the nonprofits that to the extent that you can propose regulations as opposed to amendments, it probably would be a more it'd be quicker for us to solve your problems. But if you tell us that it can't be done except by amendment, then we will have to. You run the risk that you aren't going to get 4 members of the commissioner. You aren't going to get a supermajority of the board of supervisors. So that my suggestion is that maybe a half a loaf, maybe that is consistent with the spirit. I think this commission, in Proposition C, felt that the public, there should be transparency to the public as to who is lobbying government officials for government action, and whether it's in the best of motives or the worst of motives. The public has a right to know who is putting pressure on their elected officials. Isn't necessarily a bad thing, but that somebody wants to do it, but the public has a right to know.
Right. I think it's an issue of cost.
Right. All right. Turning to item 5, items for future meetings. Commissioners may propose item for future agenda, and the commission may determine the priority. Any recommendations or proposals in that regard?
Well, we're going to have, Commissioner Rennie, we're going to have 2 interested persons meetings, but this will be agendized for the 2nd January meeting, discussion at our regular meeting. So, okay, I'm fine with that.
Turning to item number 6.
Chair Rennie should
Oh,
take public comment.
yeah, I'm sorry, public comment.
I'm sorry, I'm back. It's Larry Bush. I'd like to suggest two things that be considered by the Commission under future actions. One is expanding your outreach. As we've just been talking about nonprofits, no one has mentioned unions. In late September, I sent a memo on behalf of Friends of Ethics to the Commission, asked that a fact sheet be put together to explain to unions how Prop C might affect them. And the response that I got back from the Commission was that that wasn't on the agenda for the Commission. It needs to be put on the agenda, and you need to reach out to unions because the unions did not support Prop C. Some of them were neutral, but some of them were actually opposed. And secondly, I want to let you know that Friends of Ethics is developing a database of all the organizations that took a position on Prop C, or who didn't, but who normally would endorse. And we will make that available to you in the hopes that you might reach out to people on whatever side they were on, or if they were on no side, so that they have an opportunity to be included in the interested persons meetings on this or any other issues.
All right, thank you. It's my understanding that the list was expanded and does include unions, and I believe it includes those organizations that communicated with us concerning Proposition C, but is that correct, Mr. Nardi?
We did send 2 batches of emails out, both to political clubs, which largely include the folks that Larry's talking about, as well as a list of all the unions, and we invited them to join the interested persons list. The response was not particularly large, but we did reach out to them. There's a separate batch of nonprofits, which we've not reached out to yet, and we were waiting pending our understanding of when the new ED was going to start, thinking that he or she at the time may want to do that, but we can certainly just go ahead and send it this week or so.
Is there a reason why that somebody has to actively say they want to receive it, the interested persons list, before we can send it to them?
What happens is that if people don't sign up and we sign people up, the service that we use, which is MailChimp, if it just starts going out to people and it starts falling into their spam box, at a certain point, MailChimp will just drop us. So Stephen, our IT guy, has said that we have to, for purposes of, as long as we're going to be using a no-cost service like this, that we need to extend the invitation and have people sign up.
Now, do we, on our website, is there a way in which parties are made aware of the fact that
Yep.
that they can sign up so that they'll get communications from us? Okay,
That's right.
fine. Yes.
Eileen Hansen again, thank you. A couple of things. If I could get a copy of the outreach list that's for unions and nonprofits, I would be happy to work with the Commission in expanding that list. I've done my own outreach to try to get people to sign up, but if I know who's signed up and who hasn't, I'd be happy to try to get more people to proactively respond and sign up. I wasn't clear why we were waiting to do outreach to the nonprofits, but we had done outreach to the unions. I had hoped, since Prop C was on the agenda for tonight, we would have done that outreach to nonprofits, so we could have gotten more here. But certainly now, if we're talking about interested persons meetings coming up shortly, we should do that outreach immediately. I'm not clear on how the interested persons meetings are going to be scheduled, and it seems very tight to try to schedule those, do regulations, get everything in place by February. And maybe we're not going to do that, but I know the law has to be implemented February. So we need something in place. And I guess I would ask, just because I know how long these things take, if there's some way of creating preliminary regulations that allow the law to be instituted, but it doesn't require people to start reporting, doesn't require people to start changing the way of doing business in terms of reporting, and I'm thinking particularly nonprofits that haven't reported in the past, so that they don't immediately start doing that as of February, but instead they can wait until the regulations are finalized and in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Peter Cohen, and I'm with the Council of Community Housing Organizations. I wasn't able to make the earlier item, but I hear what's been said here, and I'm glad you're going to have at least some interested parties meetings. I'm not sure whether just tightening the regulations and tinkering is going to help, but I'm glad you're at least being able to discuss an amendment. I don't think this is just a matter of how to comply and whether or not the reporting requirements can be met. There's a very chilling effect, which I'm sure Debbie Lerman has explained, on nonprofit advocacy, the intimidation that is imposed by this, which needs to be discussed openly as part of these interested parties meetings, and I hope we can come back to you and kind of explain that this doesn't just apply equally to all organizations. There are some very small organizations that are going to be completely chilled out of our public policy debates, and that is what we're primarily concerned about here. But we understand the good intent. We just want to make sure there's no unintended consequences as a result of good intent. I will tell you that in the course of Proposition C, which of course won handily, there were 29 organizations that took a position opposing the measure. It was a principled position. Not so much with its intent, but again, that the measure wasn't designed well enough to hit its target. 29 organizations, many of them nonprofits, some labor organizations. If you're going to be having outreach and interested parties, at minimum, those organizations should all be on your list. They are genuinely concerned. And as you heard from the last speaker, we can help you make sure you're reaching out to folks. But I can tell you, in the course of designing this measure, with all due respects, there was no outreach to the nonprofit community, because the Council of Community Housing Organizations, as one, has 23 very well-known housing organizations in this city, and none of us knew about it. So we look forward to working with you going forward. It's a very important step. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Item 6, discussion.
You got someone here.
Hi, Rob Van Ravensway, Friends of Ethics and former civil grand jury member. When I was working on the civil grand jury report, where we recommended something like Proposal C, the Board of Supervisors was considering a rather large change in the lobbyist ordinance. And they changed some of the concepts of contact lobbyists and so forth. Basically, in between versions, behind closed doors, an amendment was put into that ordinance that took nonprofit lobbyists, nonprofits out of the lobby ordinance. They were in the lobby ordinance before, and then they were out. And this is exactly what you were accused of doing during the campaign over Proposal C. So I think you've got to kind of look at the whole context and understand what's going on here, because there's this effort to just kind of label business interests as evil lobbyists, and everybody else isn't really a lobbyist. But it's the same kind of communication with elected officials. You've got to think carefully about it. Yes, there are some small organizations, and you've got to think about, thresholds and things like that, and that's appropriate for regulation. But when you get into amendments, you do have language in there that talks about furthering the purpose of the ordinance. And I really would hope you would consider that as you consider any amendments to the ordinance itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen Hanson again. I apologize for coming up one more time.
I think you almost used your time.
Promise, this will be the last time. I had some time left last time, didn't I? I know we have talked in the past about putting something on the ballot that was basically looking at Prop J, and the Commission had decided not to do that this last November, and instead create a narrowly targeted ballot measure. But I hope that the revision of Prop J is still on your calendar, and I'd like to ask that a meeting discussion happen as soon as possible, because there would be a chance of putting it on the ballot in June or November, and I think a discussion needs to be had as to which of those dates make the most sense. if we're talking about June, it has to roll really fast.
I think that if you look at our prior minutes, when this subject was delegated to Commissioner Keene, the decision was made that after what became Prop C, we still were going to look at the issues that were raised out of Prop J and their elimination. So it is still on the agenda, but one of the things it was waiting for is the new executive director, who we hope will be helpful in helping us walk through that process.
Terrific. So I might suggest that it be placed on the January agenda, if possible.
I think that may be too optimistic, and the idea of getting something on the June ballot again may be too optimistic, considering we may want to look at a fairly wholesale revision
Yes.
of some of the reporting requirements. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Keene.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I could just follow up and also address what Ms. Hansen's concern was. At the time, the chair appointed a committee, an ad hoc committee of one, me at the time. It was to look at whether or not, as to whether or not Prop J would be examined and substantially revised along the lines of what Ms. Hansen's concerns and many others have been. And my original report back was that should be done, and we should definitely do that, and we will do that. We are in the process of doing that, but only because there was such a short time before the November ballot to get anything on, that we should first go piecemeal at something that we knew we could accomplish, and that was the C, expenditure lobbyists. So my understanding in terms of the mechanics of where this commission is now from the mandate of the chair is that we are very fully involved and will continue to go forward in determining major recommendations relating to Prop J, and those recommendations will come out of this commission and likely go on future ballots in order to be implemented. Now, I can't really be a prophet in regard to that, but that was sort of that's been the direction we've been heading all along since Chair Rennie very wisely, I think, undertook the mandate to go ahead and do this, look at Prop J and to revise it and to fill in some of the concerns that had arisen when Prop J sort of did this scorched earth policy in regard to many of the things relating to transparency of government in San Francisco. We want to restore those things, and I think we intend to restore those. Question is when, and hopefully we'll do it as soon as possible.
All right. Turning now to item 6, discussion of acting executive director's report.
Annual report.
Yes.
Okay, well, at Jesse Minardi, acting ED, again, at the last meeting, the commission considered the proposed annual report and actually suggested a few changes, and then delegated to Chair Rennie the ability to sort of approve and review those changes. And so those changes have been made. A number of them have been made. I can sort of highlight a couple of them, but Chair Rennie thought we should bring it back for the commission to review again for further comment. So there were a number of changes at the bottom of page 3. We, in connection with the campaign finance reform ordinance, we mentioned the consideration of Prop J and how that was considered, and then sort of decided that it would be addressed in the following year, given what ultimately became Prop C. At the bottom of page 3, again, we also indicated the amount of public financing dollars that were distributed over the course of the fiscal year in connection with 2 elections. Moving over to page 5, we, in the connection with the lobbying section, we noted again sort of Prop J, expenditure lobbyist, sort of analysis, as well as we fleshed out a little bit what happened with respect to the meetings, with respect to the expenditure lobbyist ordinance. On page 7, with investigations and enforcement, we mentioned the Mark Farrell matter and the forfeiture of $190,000. And I'm just highlighting sort of the big ones. On page 11, we, with respect to the budget, we designated the specific approved budget as well as the actual spending, indicated the difference, and then also indicated the spending from the election campaign fund. And then finally, with future initiatives at the end on page 13, we included consideration of Proposition J. We added consideration of Proposition J, and then making recommendations regarding the whistleblower protection ordinance, among other things. So those were sort of the main changes. There were some sort of stylistic and changes that were made primarily by the chair, but that's it.
I hear a motion to adopt the draft report.
Second.
Discussion? Public comment?
Hello, this is Larry Bush. I wanted to give you copies of the Controller's report on the Ethics Commission, which has statistics which are not in the annual report, and I recommend that they be included in the annual report. The statistics have to do with the percentage of complaints resolved, the number of campaign committees and publicly financed committees audited, the percentage of expected campaign finance statements filed on time, percentage of identified campaign consultants who file quarterly reports on a timely basis, and so on and so forth. The numbers in this report should be a cause of concern. They're showing that the percentage of complaints resolved was 53%. The percentage of expected campaign finance statements filed on time is 82%. The percentage of campaign consultants whose quarterly reports were filed on time is 83%, and so on and so forth. So I recommend that that data be included in the annual report. And if there's a response to it, that would be fine. Who is it from?
Who prepared that report?
The City Services Auditor, which is under the Controller. They do a similar study for every department, and it's based on submissions that come from each department.
And
there may well be some necessary commentary from the Ethics Commission about those numbers, but since that's a publicly released document and is on the internet, it would be good to be aware of it in the annual report.
All right.
Mr. Bush was referring to Proposition C. You might remember how we gave a good allocation of funds annually to the Controller's Office to do performance audits for the various departments of the city, and you're one of the departments. I think you should be an agency, but that's another question. I do want to thank Mr. Minardi. He did a very good job with the chair on the new update and the revision, and I really appreciate the budget data. It really shows the growth of your funding, yet how much you do for this reasonable amount of money, as indicated by the bottom line. It also shows the workability of I think in a graphic way, the public financing mechanism. and how that balance moves. And I think it visually explains to the public exactly in context with the report, exactly what it is you do with their money, and that I think most people in the city would think that the funds are well spent because it is not as much money as they might think it is. I wanted to thank you very much for the appointment of such a dynamic new executive director. You know my views. I think that she's already read the annual report draft. I quizzed her before the meeting, and she passed with flying colors. She also knows a tremendous amount. I just mentioned to her what Prop J was, the Oaks Foundation, and she immediately knew what that was. I didn't have to explain what the Oaks Initiative process was all about with Prop J. That was a statewide action by a group of people out of Los Angeles, because she comes from Los Angeles, but also she was involved with Prop J before. So thank you very much for that appointment, and I am very appreciative of the new draft report. I do support Mr. Bush's comments. There are several things that Peg Stevenson with the Controller's Office, it will probably add in time in the performance audit process. So it's good to have them watching over you in a constructive way, and I hope you'll add those comments that Peg did in your report.
Do I hear any motion to amend the motion to have the performance measure report be included into the annual report?
Mr. Chair, I move that it be included as an attachment with a reference in the report. But since it's not something that was actually done by this body, I think it's important information as to what we're doing. It's good for the public to know who are reviewing our annual report, but it should be a separate attachment to the annual report with a designation and an indication that it is an attachment. Because it's in furtherance of more information. It's not any endorsement of it by us or comment by us, but it's certainly important coming from the controller who has these functions of looking us over, and I think the public is helped by having this information. So I move that we just have it as an attachment with some reference in the report that there is an attachment from the Controller's Office relating to the performance of the Ethics Commission this year.
May I ask a question? Commissioner Keene, what do you think of referencing the report in a footnote of some sort with a link? Because one of my concerns is this is one page of a lengthy report. It doesn't really describe how the numbers were reached, and it might be more helpful to the public if they could reference the entire report via link or of some sort, rather than having a one-page attachment.
Mr. Chair, I think Commissioner Herr is completely right, and that's probably a better way to do it.
All right. Is a second to that
Second.
amendment? Okay. Public comment? Hearing no public comment, I'll call the question. All in favor of the approving the draft annual report with the suggested link to the Controller's report, which would identify this particular document?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Record should show it was carried unanimously. Turning to number 7, discussion and possible action on the Commission's September 28th, 2015 draft minutes.
We have the executive directors.
and also the October 26, 2015 minutes. Yeah, I'll get to it. Were there any comments on the minutes?
Chair Rennie, I believe we're currently on item 7, the executive director's report.
I know I skipped, I went to 8, so we'll do 8 while we're at it, and then we'll go back to 7.
Oh, you want to do the minutes first? Okay, great.
Seeing I called the minutes, let's deal with those.
Okay.
Any comments or corrections to the minutes?
Other than to thank the chair and the vice chair again for their hard work on vetting the candidates, since there are all these minutes to meetings that Commissioner Keene and I did not have to attend.
Oh, I want to join in that. The two of you, besides the fact that I'm also grateful that I didn't have to go through all that stuff that you guys did. It was a fine job, a really excellent job of vetting, and came down to some very good candidates. And in terms of what we wound up with, we've got the Academy Award, I think, in terms of someone who's going to be our executive director.
Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes as
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none.
You may also just want to query the audience whether they want to make any public comment on this item.
I did ask public comment.
Oh, I must have missed it. I don't know if the audience did as well. Okay.
I did.
Great.
I vote aye as well. Sorry. I missed the
Now I'll
votes.
go back to number 6, discussion of acting executive director's report.
Mr. Chair, I'll just submit the report. The only thing I was going to point out is under item 11, just that, as the chair has mentioned, that the commission is scheduled to have a meeting on January 5th at 9 a.m. I didn't add in there, which I should have, at 9 a.m. on January 5th in room 416 regarding its budget. And that the budget instructions are supposed to come out from the mayor's office on the 1st, so that I'll be able to inform that.
And we added an item to that January 5th meeting would be where we are on the drafting of regulations.
Right. Or a report back from the interested
Yes.
persons. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any public comment? Right, hearing none.
Chair Rennie, just so for planning purposes, will we have a packet for the January 5th meeting? And if so, when do you think we will receive it, given the holidays?
I think we have to have, I think by regulation, we have to have a packet that goes out to the public when the official notice goes out, so I would assume that's going to be in sometime after Christmas, but before New Year's.
We'll get it to you as soon as possible, but certainly there'll likely be a memo regarding both the feedback as well as the budget itself. Or it's 2 separate memos, I should say.
Can I just request that those be sent to, at least to me via email, given the holiday? Thank you.
I would request the same.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Public comment? Hearing none, the commission will stand adjourned, and Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah and Happy Thanksgiving and all the other holidays.
Kwanzaa in there.